Thank you very much. I mean, just a little bit of context. So, with Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary of the United States announced the reform of the World Bank and MDBs, and that kicked off a whole series of work around global financial architecture reforms. A number of African ministers of finance approached ACET and some other partners and asked for our help because they didn't have the answers around some of the complicated global financial reform architecture, and to be honest, didn't understand all of the issues. And in many cases, think tanks in their countries, which focus more on national issues, also were not conversant in those issues. One of the things that we wanted to do at that time was to look at various global financial architecture reforms and what the impact might be on humans, what the human cost of existing financial architecture is. So we were looking around, and we were wonderfully happy when we found GRADE, and even more happy when we realized we could have a wonderful partnership and collaboration, and so it's been really great. We have to date run 2,476 individual simulations over 8 areas, including global wealth tax, the impact of improved credit ratings, the potential for improved Africa Development Fund contributions. That's the equivalent of IDA for the African Development Bank, of the reallocation of special drawing rights, which has been one of the calls for action under the global financial architecture reforms, debt service. We also looked at improved domestic resource mobilization, so not only global financial reforms, but reforms within African countries, climate finance, and then a specific one on debt restructuring for Ghana related to the Euro bonds. And so other than that last one, we've run them for all of the countries that are all the African nations that are available within GRADE. And what we've done is used this as part of our advocacy toolkit, if you will. So we're very happy to say that in one instance, we had an African head of state that came to us asking for some briefing material, and we were able to provide inputs there. In another instance, it went to a briefing for a G7 Minister of Development. It's gone into numerous speeches, inputs to ministers of finance, etc. So it's been a very useful tool for us. What we hope is that it, on the one hand, gives African policymakers firepower, right? That they will actually use this data to make their arguments based in, and Stephen's points are extraordinarily important here. One is that it takes into account the governance factors, right? So this is, and the second, which is related, is that these are realistic, right? These are not pie in the sky linear based numbers, etc., that we sometimes see from advocacy organizations, which then make it very difficult for policymakers to use that data because it's not as credible as it might be in other cases. But we also want to use it to help spur action, right, in the international community and among African governments. So we are in the process. We've engaged a communications firm, and we are preparing to roll out a public advocacy campaign. This will be a social media campaign and so forth, using a large amount of this data, and then also looking at developing kind of a chapeau document, a policy brief type document. So this has been extraordinarily useful for us, and I think for African policymakers, to ensure that we have, again, realistic data. It's great that it covers many countries. I mean, this is the challenge that we often face, is the data isn't available for, is available for some countries, not for others, and so forth. It doesn't cover all African countries, but it covers many. As far as improvements and so forth, needless to say, the more SDGs that one can cover, the better. It was great to have the clean energy indicator added relatively recently. That's great, but of course, the more that that we can have available, the better. So I'll leave it there, but it's been a great experience. My colleague Frank Adu, I think, is on the call. He was actually the brains behind actually running all the simulations. So if people have specific questions about using the model and some of the statistical, there were some challenges, of course, as we got into this. It's a relatively complicated model, so I think it's isn't some people may have challenges in using it if they're not used to using those kind of models, but Frank is here if there's questions on that as well. But thank you very much, and again, we really appreciate the collaboration with both Leicester and St. Andrews. Thank you.